Pro Mazda action back in Europe, virtual Europe, in the Netherlands at the Circuit Park Zandvoort, a circuit that Formula One will revisit back in 2020, but we get a bit of spicy action here in our open-wheeled Pro Mazda vehicles. There's the track details up on screen, a 4.2 kilometer circuit, 2.5 miles, depending on your units of choice. Now, of course, we do have a good, strong field here for the top split. Maybe not your top names that we expect. You know, we don't see your Julian Dunns, your Martin Arnolduses, but there'll be somebody else here ready to take a victory and a good, strong haul of points here in this strength of field race on Sunday. Welcome to RaceSpotTV. Jonathan Simon in the commentary booth alongside Randall Cheneth. Randy, Zandvoort is a circuit that's notorious for its difficulty to overtake at, but I did cover the Supercars E-Series here a couple of weeks ago on iRacing, and they proved us all wrong. Overtakes happen every now and then here at Zandvoort, and it's possible if you pick your lines right.
Yeah, Zandvoort's one of those tracks I feel it's a little bit, I think it can be difficult to pass, surely. But I think these little Formula Series cars, Johnny, I think they're going to suit this place well. They don't have, you know, super tons of speed. So a lot of the places that, you know, some of the faster and even bigger cars you might typically see around here kind of have to be single file. These smaller cars, a little bit less power and maybe don't have quite the speed, they can kind of make passes and other points around this racetrack. But I really do love this circuit, even with this sort of redesigned layout. It's not the old school circuit from years ago, of course, but I think it has the same feel of an old school circuit, and that's why I think so many love it. And it's going to be fun to watch Formula One cars rip around this place next year.
Yeah, most certainly. And that final corner at Zandvoort has 18 degrees of banking, and it's a corner that can put so much stress on tires. And I believe, Randy, that Michigan itself in the USA also has 18 degrees of banking at one of the corners. So
yeah,
that's
the whole state.
The circuit, did I not say the circuit? Excuse me. But the circuit itself has 18 degrees of banking.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But yeah, I mean, it is, you know, that final corner, it is so fast. Our line dike curve, it is a ton of fun. And I will say it's always been, you know, going through there, it's such a fun final corner that leads you onto the front straightaway, but you carry a ton of speed, and these little Formula cars, you're going to be seeing these guys really work and really working the slipstream on the run in towards turn one. But we got qualifying getting ready to wrap up. Andre Cini taking pole position, 3/10 clear of anybody, so he might be taking the dominant run in this one, Johnny, and we're going to be on that starting grid in about 10 seconds time.
Yep, qualifying's over. Now, remember, these drivers have 8 minutes to set times and only 2 laps, of course. 2 hot laps that the drivers are allowed to set, so they probably won't pull into the pits of, we should say, is the right strategy. There's a checkered flag. It's time to look at our grid for today's event. Andrea Cini will start on pole, as Randy just said. Brilliant pole position time, and 3/10 up on Canadian Scott McIntyre. On the second row will be Anne Medema and Mark Cooper. Anne Medema, very experienced in Pro Mazdas, needs a good getaway here at the start and is in contention for that lead here in the opening corners. Then Zwindler, Erwin Vandenberg will start on the third row. Now, we see Martin Andula just ahead of Gabriel Perez. Perez is a stronger racer than he is a qualifier, so we'll keep eyes on him throughout the event. Jean-Michel Neon starts from 9th. Donald Poole round out the top 10. Surprising to see Fabio Berchtold and the ever-quick Cobus Marie down there outside the top 10. So maybe with a lack of practice, they'll be quicker throughout this event. But we're ready to kick over to the race. Now, it's a very short run here, Randy, to turn 1, which means you need to get a good jump, and reaction time is critical.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. You've got to get this start absolutely perfect to get yourself down in there, and you don't have a lot of real estate to work with. Like you said, you don't get the big long run if you're starting 3rd, 4th, 5th, maybe in line to maybe make some spots up. So you got to get that start absolutely perfect. But that said, if you don't get a great jump, with it being a short run to turn 1, Johnny, in some ways it's a little less penalizing if you don't get an amazing start. You may only lose 1 to 2 spots, where you may ordinarily lose maybe 2, 3, or 4.
So we'll wait and see what happens in the start of the race, of course. So it will take place in about 20 seconds time. Who's that number 4? Is that an Amadema? What a beautiful livery for Amadema there. There's our pole sitter, Andrea Cini. And the grid has all joined. 20 laps of action. Now, the last time we broadcasted Pro Mazda, we weren't expecting pit stops. Let's see what happens today. We go green from Zandvoort. And already Cini on the defensive from McIntyre. Amadema here is going to try and split the both of them, but it looks like into turn one, Cini will still remain in the lead there. McIntyre files behind in second. Clean getaway from the rest of the field behind, and now we head through this tight and twisty first sector. Brilliant jump by Cini, very aggressive.
Yeah, great jump there by Cini. We're watching right now the fight between the 12 and the 3 in your mid-pack. That's Fabio Berchtold and Gabriel Perez. Looks like Perez is falling down the running order a little bit. Cycling back forward. Second spot contested right now between Scott McIntyre and Amadema. Through this downhill right-hander, probably the most iconic corner on this circuit. That corner is so fast. We'll try to get some onboards of that corner over the course of this event. But right now your car is cycling through, Johnny, and that was very well executed by this entire group. I don't think we have any kind of big lap one shunts to talk about. The 20 of Roy Pruitt's down the order, but I think he may not have made the grid. That car doesn't look damaged whatsoever. Everyone's pretty much out and running here through the first half a lap.
Yeah, Roy Pruitt did start on the 10th row, or he was listed as starting on the 10th row, so we'll wait and see and find out what occurred to him there in the opening laps. Carlos Medina, though, who started last, is up a few spots here. Medina into ahead there of Pruitt, who had some issues. Now through the final corner here, this is the 18 degrees of banking that put so much stress on those left-hand side tires. Will end lap one here of 20, and it's Cini who leads from McIntyre, from Medema. How about Erwin Vandenberg in the 4th position? He started from the 3rd row, up 2 spots. Cooper from 4th to 5th. Fabio Berchtold, though, from 11th to 8th. He's had the best jump.
Yeah, he's definitely the biggest mover in that sense, moving himself kind of from the middle of the mid-pack up towards the pointer end of that mid-pack. And right now he's fighting and pressuring Martin Andula as he works through the Holden Holds corner, that hairpin. Trying to name off some of these corner names will be a struggle for the English natives, myself and Johnny, considering these are all in Dutch. You kind of see Ari Leyendijk and Hans Ernst, but a couple of these names are definitely a little bit of a struggle to get off here. You see this mid-pack starting to stretch out a little bit, and one of the big talking points, Johnny, is going to be dirty air at this racetrack, because you just look at the track map and you can see you're going to be slamming the aero on this car, but you have a relatively long front straightaway to work with, which means you're going to want the car trimmed out a little in order to work in the slipstream. And these little formula cars, the dirty air is not going to be as much of an effect. You're definitely still going to feel it, but I definitely think it's going to be a huge talking point when we talk about the big open wheel cars coming in here in the next year, 1 to 2 years, especially in the real world.
Vandenberg has a lot of pace there in the 4th position. He's right behind that number 4 of Amadema. Let's have a watch here through the final corner. I think Erwin's got a good draft. Oh, he's way too far behind, I think, heading into turn 1. Now, you spoke about these cars, Randy. They are on V6 tires, as we see some movers and shakers down the rear end of the field here. This is for your spots at the bottom end of the top 10. Looks like there's Jean-Michel Nayon involved, Perez, Berchtold at the front of this train. And it's all some good racing now, but these cars are on V6 tires. And Randy, that means when you're stuck in the dirty air, you can't afford any oversteer moments through these high-speed corners.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. You don't want to get the things too squirrely, especially now. The tires are going to be just about up to temps. Of course, these guys bringing it on to the start-finish, the tire temps will come down a little bit. They've not gotten a warm-up lap to really warm them up or anything, but the tires now at this point should be up to temp, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue for these guys as they work, as the sort of this battle single files out a little bit through the middle part of the circuit. And now it's really, this lead group seems to be the closest and most contested, Johnny, between the likes of Cini, McIntyre, Medema, and Vandenberg. But the whole field is they're separating, I think, the way you might expect here at Zandvoort. It's sort of a 4 to 5 tenths of a second gap, car to car to car here at the start of the race. This lead group is staying the closest of all amongst each other, but this track is going to tend to separate these guys out a little bit.
And this racetrack will be a sea of orange in 2020. It's interesting to see how the track looks when Formula One does visit here eventually. But of course, anyway, our focus is on Pro Mazda now. We're 1/5 of the way through this race. And I love my fractions. We'll be a quarter of the way through next lap. And here we watch Amadema still in third. So what's the way to pass here, Randy? If you're Scott McIntyre, who looks quicker than Andrea Cini, just remain in the draft, right? Maybe keep the pressure on Cini, because this is almost like if iRacing had a Monaco Grand Prix, as McIntyre gets awfully close here, this is what you need to do. Just remain as close behind as possible and try and force Cini into a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's really what you need to do right now if you're McIntyre, because let's be real, there's not a lot of passing opportunities at this racetrack. It's something that people have talked about for years. Of course, you know, sim racers that have been sort of running all sorts of cars here, and in the real world, it's sort of known as being a track that's difficult to pass at. We've seen DTM come here in the past, and I know it's been a talking point. I know we keep mentioning it, but I know it's going to be a talking point with Formula One is where exactly do you slot those DRS zones and where are cars going to make actual passes at. It is sort of a track that's difficult to make moves at. I think for these guys, and I think if you're Scott McIntyre, you make the move down the front straightaway into turn one. We were just on board with him, but as he cycles through Ari Lyondike corner to cycle back onto the front straightaway, we'll watch with him again. You need to sit in the slipstream just like this and make the move at turn one. He's got a good run here, Johnny, and here's going to come the move in towards turn one. First challenge for the race lead.
Brilliant pass by the Canadian if he can pull it off. And he's going to have the inside line here into turn one. And he's confirmed in P1 for the moment. Now, will Cini fight back for the lead? He's going to have to form up here through this tight turn four at Zandvoort. Look at all the camber here that's available at this illustrious European circuit. Now, for Cini, he's going to be able to fight back next lap, but he's also going to have to defend from Amadema.
Now, I'm actually curious. We had the speed graphic up, and we saw McIntyre 134 miles an hour down the hill when he was in second. He actually touched 136 down Savac that time, Johnny. So I think the clean air probably helping these guys to go down that downhill right-hander. We've gotten a couple onboard shots with it now. And my plan was to actually ride on board with Cini through that corner this lap if he maintained the leads. Otherwise, I would have last lap. But it seems like the clean air, that's definitely going to be the corner that these guys really struggle, I think, with the downforce. Seems to be a couple mile an hour difference for these guys if they're kind of running second, third in line down that fast downhill right-hander.
Tell you what, Amadema is very close here to the top three. That's Erwin Vandenberg in fourth, who looked racy in the opening laps. And if he can tag along with the train here and remain in a slipstream, you never know. Oh, and this is McIntyre going defensive for the lead already. Cini to the outside. They're going to be alongside each other yet again for the second lap in a row. Deja vu, isn't it? Is it going to be deja vu on the exit, though? Oh, still alongside each other. They're going to have to form up here. Cini back into the lead.
Yes, great move there. Deja vu, and I have to say, we've just been in this place before as they work off that sort of middle hairpin of the lap and they again start the run down towards through the Rob Slotemaker straightaway and in towards Savac once again. Nearly a challenge for that race lead, and actually is he going to slot it up the inside? No, I will say you can make moves into that corner. I've seen it done before, but it's very difficult. And Madema in the background trying to make moves. Oh yeah, spun around. We just heard that. Also Erwin Vandenberg involved. Replay up on screen.
Goodness me. So let's have a look at the replay here. Now, was there contact? I think Amadema lost this on their own. Let's have a look. Just touch the grass there, Randy.
Yep.
Just touch the grass. I think, yeah, touch the grass. And did Vandenberg touch the grass as well?
That's what we're about to find out. That's what we're about to find out is if this was forced forced air with Amadema going off, or did he make his own separate mistake? Down the hill goes Erwin Vandenberg, and you see Madema starting to have the issues, and he just clipped the curb on the right. So that's sort of the two ways you can really mess up that right-hander and have it bite you, Johnny. You either clip the grass on the left as you turn in, or when you get to the apex point, you clip that curb a little bit too hard and it really bounces that car around and upsets the car. And kind of unfortunate there. We saw two cars make basically the same mistake at the same time. What do you got?
And Perez is into third, so a move there by Gabriel Perez on Mark Cooper, which turns into the third position now that with Madema and, of course, Vandenberg spinning out last lap. And Gabriel Perez, I talked about him being a strong racer, don't forget, Randy. And remember, from Interlagos, a victory to his name.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, 8th up to 4th. That was great fuel economy as well from him at Interlagos. Really was kind of a surprise win, I think, for a number of people, which is definitely weird that late into the week that some people hadn't figured out that you can make it on gas. But up 4 spots is Gabe Perez. We have a couple other movers as well. Fabio Berchtold, 11th up to 7th. 4 spots seems to be about the max. I think people have gone up. Carlos Medina is actually up 5. 20th up to 15th, but of course I think a couple drivers having issues and dropping out of the race. We don't have Donald Poole or Marcus Suvzer currently out there on the racetrack. But Johnny, talking about this, and you've mentioned the camber several times, this always seems like a unique racetrack to me because there's not really any significant corner where the camber really fights you. And you know, I think about when I drive this place, so many of the corners feels like they're 5, 6, maybe even 10 miles an hour quicker than they would be if they were flat because of the way the camber works. I mean, turn 1 is a cambered hairpin, then you get to turn, I think it's technically turn 3, turn 4 is another cambered hairpin. Down the hill, the banking works with you. The other hairpin near the end of the lap, the banking helps you. Then, of course, Ari Lyondike curve. It's really kind of a unique road course in that respect that everywhere you go, the actual angle of the racetrack is helping the car hold speed through the corner.
Yep, and behind the scenes, we saw Medema make his way past Jens Windler, and that was for 5th and 6th. And Medema, after the early spin there, he approaches in shot. What a brilliant shot that was as they rise over the hill here through the end of the first sector at Zandvoort. And I enjoy the challenge, Randy, of off-camber corners, but I think it's much more... It's less challenging with a cambered corner, but it's fun. You know what I mean? You just love it more. You just ride the corner and you just enjoy it like a roller coaster.
Oh, and you look here at Amadema, gets off a little bit wide on one of the few corners that you really don't have the camber helping you as we're talking about it in the 4. Oh, the 13 as well. He immediately gets some oversteer. That's Jens Windler in the middle of the field. And this is going to stack up this whole mid-pack group as they work down in towards the Audi hairpin, the Hans Urs hairpin, and through sort of the Audi S, I think is typically called, and they'll work through and out there, and they will start stringing themselves out once again. But you're right, Johnny. I mean, it's definitely not as difficult. You know, I don't think there's any questioning that, but it's just fun. You know, you think about Pouon at Spa, for example. You kind of just on the high downforce cars, you sort of just send the car into the corner, and you just sort of lift, and it just sort of sticks, doesn't it? Maybe not as challenging, but definitely a ton of fun. And actually, Savat here is actually very simple in that regard, Johnny. I'm sure you've done some wheeling around this place in some of these middle downforce cars. I mean, it's not really a braking zone kind of going down that long right-hander that we'll see here in just a couple of moments. It's kind of just lift. Maybe you blip the brake to set the nose, but besides that, so you're pretty much on the throttle all the way down that hill.
Oh, we had the Grand Prix series here for iRacing. The World Championship, that is. A couple of years back. Yeah. And, racing was, overtaking was definitely possible there. So it was a good fun track. Looking forward to, Pro Mazdas have shown us some good action so far. A lot of it has been a race for attrition at the moment. Ironically, only 2 drivers out of the race, and Randy mentioned those, Donald Poole, Marcus Suvzer. They are out of the race, so we still have 18 cars left out there. Roy Pruitt still running around in the last position, along with Carlos Medema. Now, I'm looking to see whether or not Scott McIntyre can get a good run out of the final corner for the lead, because I saw on my timing screens last lap, he was about a 10th behind. Now he's dropped back just by a touch. Cheney doesn't bother defending the slipstream, but McIntyre should gain about a 10th here across the straight.
Yeah, he's not gotten that good of exit this time. You see he's going to close. Actually, I think he locked that front right tire, maybe locking up a little bit, pushing a little bit too hard in the braking zone. But I think the thing is here, Johnny, is that for Scott McIntyre now is now that he doesn't have a car up his tailpipe in third, there's not really any reason, I think, to really pressure Andre Cini. If you don't think you're that much faster, there's no point in going out and just battling wheel-to-wheel each other lap on lap. Yeah, it'd be a ton of fun for us to watch. But if he can't break away, you might as well just sit here in third, as he's going to show the nose here down the hill. And I think he was a little bit more keen that time, but Cini slammed the door shut. I want to see it happen. I really do. But yeah, you mentioned the World Championship in here in the past. Have you ever heard Hugo's story about his race here? I think it was the first or second year they came here. So Hugo said that in qualifying, because obviously in the F1 cars, they're so much quicker that, like, Obviously, in these cars, you kind of have 1 or 2 good passing opportunities. You really get half of a passing opportunity in the Formula 1 cars, be it the Williams or the McLaren. According to Hugo, his story was that he managed a lap in qualifying 3/10 quicker than anything he'd done in practice during the week, and because it was so hard to pass, he just won the race by default.
Wow. I've never been that good to do that. I've never understood that. I reckon he just hadn't practiced enough. Because I don't know how you go quicker. Like, it must have been conditions. When I was racing, like, I'd set my personal best, let's say, a day before the race. Because that's when I, work on the setup last. And then when I get to qualifying, it's like I'm always maybe 2/10 off my PB. Obviously, I wasn't as good of a driver, but I just don't know. I don't believe those stories when drivers say that. I reckon they're doing that Fernando Alonso thing where they sort of make themselves look good by spicing up the story.
I believe Hugo, because Hugo's not usually one to be like that. Hugo's usually kind of laid back and a little bit more, let's say, Hugo doesn't like to hype himself up as much. So Hugo would, and here he goes again, McIntyre up the inside. He really wants to make that move. I'm not going to lie, I really want to see him make it.
I'll tell you what, brilliant racing from these two. A lot of respect there with track space. Cheney trusts McIntyre and vice versa here. This is the battle for the lead so far. For third and fourth, Perez looks comfortable in third for a podium, and he looks comfortable for a win if these two could possibly collide. We hope we don't see that. But it's good to see that your top 3 highest I-rated driver, not in the same order, but your top 3 highest I-rated drivers are in those top 3 positions. But also brilliant to see Mark Cooper, number 16 in this 20-car race. Fabio Berchtold, number 12. Brilliant events for those two, and they should be getting a good I-rating gain if they finish this race in those spots.
Yeah, they're going to be licking their lips at the opportunity for the I-rating so long as Cooper and Fabio can hold on to their spots. Let's see McIntyre this time in towards turn 1. Is he going to get the move done? The answer to the question is going to be no as they work through. We're going to ride on board with them here as well, actually, as they go side by side, exit of turn 1. Great exit there by McIntyre, but do you think maybe McIntyre is giving up a little bit of speed here, Johnny? We see him getting close when he gets to Sabak, the downhill right-hander. Do you think he's giving up a little bit too much speed, having to cycle back in the line there, and that's why he's not able to make a move eventually down the front straightaway? He's having to reel that gap back in when they ever get to that final corner.
Yeah, look, he's got 8 laps to think about it. The way I used to do it as a driver is in McIntyre's situation now, he's pulled every trick in the book, right? He's tried peaking, he's tried throwing it up the inside, dive bombing. Nothing's working. So now what I would do is, I don't care about dirty air. I'm not going to pull off any moves. I'm just going to get as close behind to Cheney as possible, even if it's a thousandth of a second, just literally a millimeter behind that rear gearbox. I'm going to stay as close as possible and then make the move in like 2 laps time. So does that make sense to you? You don't want to pull up any fake moves. You lose 3/10. So let's see if it works, though. It's very difficult to maneuver.
And if you're going to pull off a fake move, Johnny, it's important. It's sort of weird. You have to know how to not make a move as well as you have to know how to make it. Because if you sort of pull off the fake move and you mention it and you lose yourself 3 or 4 tenths, then you're just sort of, that fake move isn't doing anything. I will say as well, though, Johnny, watching that last trip through, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, we'll talk about this in a second. Cooper spun from third.
From
fourth, sorry. From fourth. So Mark Cooper from the 4th position has spun around. There he is on screen in that what looks like a breast cancer awareness car. So
yep.
Certainly for a good cause, but not for his race. Not a good cause this afternoon for Mark Cooper. This happened through the Audi S, I think?
Yep, looks like it. I think it's on the exit, actually, of the second part. Car's okay through the center of it and gets out there, and yeah, he just picks up the throttle maybe a little bit too hard, but I think mostly just a little bit too much curb. But I was actually going to mention the Audi S here, Johnny, because last trip around the racetrack, it seemed to me that McIntyre doesn't have a good of a line and seems to lose a little bit of time through the Audi S versus Cini, which is, of course, disastrous because immediately after the Audi S, you basically come onto the front straightaway, and that's where you need to be good. So we'll watch on board here. We'll see if that green and red car opens up the gap through this end of the racetrack, and we'll watch the lines and compare. Well, he looked pretty good that time, so what do I know?
He nailed it. Let's have a look through the final corner now. McIntyre looks visually closer, definitely. Oh, he's got a mammoth run here through the final corner. Never seen him so close since the early laps. The Canadian searching for the lead and giving plenty of room to Andrea Cini alongside each other here on lap 13 of 20. And through the inside goes McIntyre. Now that is for P1. Is it temporary? We'll wait and see.
Yep, so Cini's immediately going to get into the slipstream. That was very well handled and managed by Cini. Lost the race lead, but didn't lose any time with it. You'll sometimes see drivers, they'll try to defend really hard. He kind of just let the pass happen, Johnny, and because of that, he's still right up the tailpipe of that one of Scott McIntyre. Up the hill now once again, getting ready to head down to the back, up the inside, showing the nose. Cini's showing McIntyre that he can do that too as they work their way through. And now the question is going to be, can Cini maybe immediately respond here and get a run through the Audi S? Because I still think McIntyre was struggling with it on the previous laps, and that's why we never saw him get anywhere near close enough, except for the times he's made the passes. It'll be interesting to see if Cini can maybe make the move here and will flip-flop this time.
And we just heard word that Owen Vandenberg, after his earlier spin, just passed Ollie Rutgen through Hugenholtz, turn 4. So a brilliant move here by him. Here are your two leaders fighting for the race win. And a strong haul of points here for the championship in the closing stages of Season 4 for 2019. And not going to happen this lap round for these two. But at the moment, if you're Perez, Randy, you've got no chance of winning this race on pace right now. But you'll be praying right now when you look at your relative times that they do collide into turn 1. Tell you what, I'm going to swallow my words because Cini had a run into turn 1, but McIntyre is going to maintain the lead.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Gabe Perez right now, he really needs, if he wants to win this race, it's not in his hands anymore, is it? It's up in these guys. Either McIntyre or Cini, one of these guys makes a mistake. They could hand that victory by default over to the 3 of Gabriel Perez, but I'm not going to lie. I kind of hope that this fight stays close all the way to the end of this. Sorry about that, Gabriel Perez, but I'm definitely biased towards close fights. Shows a nose at the inside to Cini, but I just want to see one of these guys, Johnny, they keep kind of half showing the nose there, and I will say it's a point of the racetrack that's it's tempting to show the nose there. Back when I used to race a lot, I remember coming here, I've definitely attempted passes down that hill more than one occasion. I want to see these guys get brave and actually do it, though. They've not been quite close enough, however, to make that move stick.
We'll wait and find out here in the closing stages for Pro Mazda. And Randy, of course, upcoming broadcast for Pro Mazda here in the closing stages. We have, we'll be covering a few other weeks during the season. We'll talk about that in a few moments' time. I'm just getting a bit nervous as to whether or not Cini will have a run here through the final corner. But again, where do you do it? You got to do it into turn 1, right? It's not really going to happen into turn 8, the right-hander.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And it looks like actually Cini might have the run this time up the front straightaway. McIntyre is not even going to fight it. Is he going to let him have the spot, though, through the corner? You can defend the outside. The banking can keep the speed up, but great move there by Cini.
Yeah, and he's, well, a mammoth advantage here over Scott McIntyre. And again, like I said a couple of laps ago, it was temporary for McIntyre in the lead. And we'll see if he can reclaim that advantage. It's a good race between these two. A nice little tussle. A lot of other scraps throughout the field. We have Mark Cooper, who, after his spin, is under attack from Marcin Andula for the 8th position. Nice train behind Jean-Michel Noyon, who's had a good race. Started from the 5th row in 9th, up in the 6th so far. Now, we talked about broadcast coming up for Pro Mazda. We'll be covering next week at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. For the first time, this car visits that circuit on iRacing. Of course, the circuit new in Season 4. And then we'll visit Phillip Island for the final round, week number 12 for 2019. 2 good racetracks to visit to.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. Barcelona is going to be a fantastic track, and we're running the full layout there as we'll go back to the pictures and fight for the race lead. And actually, Andre Cini's been able to open up a little bit of an advantage here over Scott McIntyre as they sweep onto the front straightaway. Scott's going to be grasping at straws to get whatever slipstream he can here to bring the margin back down this front straightaway. But Barcelona is going to be a ton of fun, Johnny. And I actually love these last 3 weeks of races, Zandvoort, Catalunya, and Phillip Island. Zandy and Phillip Island are both semi-similar in the sense that they're very fast with very flowing corners, Johnny. Barcelona a little bit different, though, being the Grand Prix circuit. Of course, you have those sort of fast corners, like turn 3, turn 4 definitely comes to mind. That last sequence of corners is great as well. But there's definitely a little bit more start-stop at that big Grand Prix circuit than we get here on Phillip Island and Zandvoort.
Exactly, and a very long front straight at Barcelona.
Yeah, it's about 100 miles long, isn't it, for these things?
The runway. It's like the runway from Fast and the Furious 5, is it? You know, the one that never ends?
Something like that, yeah.
The 8-minute long runway. So it's that long. We'll visit that, of course, next week. But with 4 to go, we haven't decided who's going to win this race. Somebody, please tell us who's going to win in the comments if you're watching. Let us know who you think it's going to be. Andrea Cini, Scott McIntyre possibly. Perez again sitting comfortably in 3rd after a brilliant start. Always has the race pace. As Perez, Berchtold 4th. Medema will be kicking himself. I'm kicking myself that Medema and Erwin Vandenberg had their spins. This would have been awesome to see. Top 4 battling for the win.
Yeah, this would have been fantastic. It is really a bummer to see. I will say, though, Johnny, one of the things I'm quite pleased with is that this is typically a very difficult track to race at. Is actually McIntyre. I'll hold my point as he seems to have a run. Cini's going to go defensive on the inside. Look for McIntyre around the outside, but Cini's got the move blocked off because can the cutback move work?
Now that worked there for Cini. That's interesting. Will he keep doing it? Will he keep defending the inside? If I'm McIntyre, I would dummy the outside and just find any piece of tarmac on the inside that will work and just force him offline, because I thought that defensive move by Cini could pay off these next 3 laps. I would do the same thing if McIntyre can't find a way through.
McIntyre again shows the nose here down this downhill right-hander, but again won't go for it, just not close enough. I will say I'm quite impressed, Johnny. I was going to make the point last trip around the racetrack. This is typically a very difficult track to race at. Not a lot of passing opportunities, a lot of sort of zones on the racetrack you might think is a passing opportunity, and people will sometimes confidently send the car down the inside when there's in reality no hope of that sticking. I've not seen any moves from these guys that I would say are unwarranted or silly in any way. These guys up and down the field, everyone has been racing relatively smartly, and no one's put their car in a sort of place you might make a rookie mistake and jeopardize yourself and maybe your competition's event. Been an absolutely phenomenal race for this entire grid, and especially these two fighting for the win. Neither of them have let their emotions escape from them as they'll come down for an emotional roller coaster into turn 1 once again.
If I'm McIntyre, I go right up to the pit wall, but there's no space. Cini blocks the inside yet again. Is it going to work a second time for Andrea Cini? McIntyre just shoves it into the corner. Now somehow there, Randy, I'm not sure if he had a wobble mid-corner or some form of oversteer or something, but McIntyre just lost an immense amount of speed.
Yeah, he was out there on the outside, which we've seen work and seen people make it stick, but I think you're right. I think he may have gotten a little wiggle, maybe even just got a little bit tight. But regardless, that's going to cut his opportunities down to 1. Sits in the slipstream. He won't even, of course, nowhere near close enough to look up the inside here. So we'll run the racing line, push it a little bit wider than Cini did. Man, this car seems to be working really well, Johnny, and I actually think there might be some setup differences here. I think McIntyre has a little bit more aero on the car than Cini does, because Scott seems quicker through the high-speed corners and a little bit better on the brakes. But Cini just seems to have an extra few miles an hour going into turn 1 at the end of the front straightaway. Regardless, Audi S for the penultimate time, and we know that this is really where the run for turn 1 gets set up.
I've noticed that too. Cini does have that extra straight line speed advantage at the end of the straights, but for McIntyre, it's been a horrible penultimate lap so far. And he'll still be close enough for the run here out of the final corner, but it's a long way behind for Scott McIntyre. He needs that inside line into turn 1. Now, if it's not going to happen into turn 1, he could make it into turn 8 possibly. He's going to need a miracle. Throws it up the inside. Cini left the door open. McIntyre's going for broke. Couldn't pull off the move.
I'm not sure if Cini maybe knew that move was going to happen, Johnny, or if he just made a mistake down there at turn 1. Regardless, Scott McIntyre, full confidence, centered up the inside, off of that corner now at turn number 3 as they scream through the hill. Is this the time? McIntyre sends it up with the inside down the hill.
Oh, we had to back off the gas. He had the run just a little too early. Oh, I think that might be it. That may be it. Here's this deadly right-hander coming up here. If Cheney can maneuver this, he'll be okay. Oh, goodness me. So for McIntyre, he fought for it. He led a couple of laps, don't forget. But the overtakes and the opportunities are going to be ever so slim here to close the lap. Audi, yes, perhaps? No, he's way too far behind.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. Audi, you can slot it up the inside, but it was that move at the top of the hill, even kind of running the inside line, killed all his speed and all his momentum. And Cheney, a couple more corners to go. We've not seen anyone beat the car to the line ahead of them, so definitely looking strong for Cheney.
Well, he drove splendidly. Andrea Cheney led the race from pole position. He had a very aggressive start, a well set up Pro Mazda, and he will win from week 10 here at the Circuit Park Zandvoort. Andrea Cheney with a valiant victory, one to remember again for quite some time. McIntyre, good to see him fighting near the top for a win, and unfortunately he ends up second on the podium nevertheless, but he'll be enjoying that race, I'm sure. Scott McIntyre, good fun between those two. Perez at the end of the day will come home in third, that's confirmed. Fabio Berchtold, after starting from outside the top 10, ends up in fourth. A brilliant result for Berchtold. Medema looks like has parked it and will end up in fifth after the earlier spin. Now, what could have been between Medema and, of course, Erwin Vandenberg had they not had their spins, but we're forgetting something. I mean, Cheney and McIntyre won the race, but Perez, tell you what, drove quite well out there.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Something as well, by the way, seems to have happened to Erwin Vandenberg, because I see him in the 15th spot, scored one lap down. So something happened to Erwin there on those final couple of laps to, I think, drop him out of the race. But what a run there between Cheney and McIntyre. Well, that was one of the most fun races I've seen in a long time, Johnny. It didn't let up the entire way, and that 20 laps went by really fast because of it. But regardless, post-race results, we got them now.
Yeah, oh, it was a high-speed accident, by the way. We'll have a look at the results in a second, but high-speed accident for Erwin Vandenberg, and he certainly had a quite to say here towards the end of the race. But nevertheless, let's have a look at your final race results. And Andrea Cheney will win ahead of Scott McIntyre. Perez in third, like we said. Now, Berchtold, a good result. We've seen Berchtold in better races in the past. I'm sure if he practiced and sorted out qualifying, he'd be up there fighting for the win along with your top three. Your top three, don't forget, are your top three highest I rating in terms of drivers here this afternoon. Medema will file home, rounding out the top five. Jean-Michel Noyon, I missed Jean-Michel Noyon, ends up in sixth at the end of the day. Roberts, didn't see much from Chris Roberts today. From 13th to 7th, though, climbed his way up through the field, just ahead of Marcin Andula. Now, that's where Erwin Vandenberg was. He was expected to finish around about 7th or 8th, but with that end of race contact with Mark Cooper, we're hearing, who ended up in 9th. Cooper ended up finishing the race with a bit of damage, but Vandenberg was classified as one lap down. For Ollie Rutgen, just outside the top 10 in 11th, begins our second page of results. Michel Prudhomme ahead of Louis Canal, and Carlos Medina, who started last, ended up in 14th. So there is Vandenberg confirmed in 15th, one lap down. For Cobus Marie, was hoping to see a lights-out performance from Cobus Marie, but again, the lack of practice for Cobus costing him a good strong haul of I rating for himself and points for the championship. Steve Cube started 17th, ended up 18th with a DNF to his name. And remember, Donald Poole and Marcus Sufsa were out of the race earlier on in the opening laps. Now, Randy, like we said, I'm not sure if you have footage on Vandenberg and that final lap contact with Mark Cooper. We'll have a look right now, actually. We've just heard we're getting it up. So this is high speed right now, heading into turn 8. Talk us through it.
I'm trying to actually get it up, so my apologies. It's a good thing Will isn't here, otherwise there'd be an innuendo coming for sure. But it seems to be... Yeah, whoops, he's definitely not the winner. Apologies on that one. But let's see what happens to Mr. Erwin Vandenberg. I've seen them discussing it in the chat, so this is definitely going to be interesting. Through that right-hander, up towards the hairpin. Everything's sort of good and looking calm at the moment. The incident with Mark Cooper gets a run. Erwin comes up the left-hand side of the racetrack. And it's going to be down the downhill right-hander. Kind of looks like Cooper just cut across, but I'll be honest, it was kind of difficult to tell on that camera shot. I'm going to ride on board here with Irwin this time. We'll go to the roll bar cam, actually, so you get a little bit of a wider lens with it. We'll slow it down to about quarter speed.
He looks alongside him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he definitely does here, but I wanted to see what Cooper does exactly. Yeah, I think Cooper just kind of cuts across, I think. Irwin's definitely there. We'll ride it on board with Cooper this time as well for the next bit of replay. But definitely, I would, looking at that incident, I would say it's probably on the 16. Want to ride on board, see what he saw, though. Maybe there's something a little bit different with it, but up the hill, across, and yeah, he kind of just clears himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously not intentional, not malicious by Mark Cooper, but if I was in Mark Cooper's position, I wouldn't just go and take the racing line. Normally, what you see, I don't know if I should say this, what you see in the real world is Cooper is actually the one who would end up in the wall. Normally, he'd be like pit maneuvered almost. So I'm surprised that Vandenberg was shoved into the barrier. I think Mark Cooper's got Gregor Hutu's 2015 iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series car. It's just a brick.
Oh, no. Maybe. Oh, that was definitely the camera shot we want. Well, I actually want to make sure I keep this camera angle, so I'll rewind it back the not great way, and you'll see, actually, I think this is a camera shot that really shows it. You can see Irwin's fully alongside, and I think you're kind of right. I think typically you would expect on an incident like this, I think both cars, especially with open wheelers, Johnny, I think they'd both typically end up in the wall. I think the thing that might be weird there, though, is just the way the cars are loaded, because the cars are loaded, there's a lot of left-hand force kind of, I think, on the cars, because you're kind of constantly turning to the right. But I think that might be why Cooper's the one that didn't end up in the wall there, and instead it was Vandenberg. But yeah, regardless, I definitely think that was on Cooper there. We will take a look, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, before we close out, to show you the schedule we've had thus far. You see the 3 races we've done. I'll say, Johnny, it's been a month since we did Interlagos, and I don't know where the time's gone, because it doesn't feel like that was a month ago.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
No, it didn't. This last few weeks has been quick.
Well, yeah, for sure. But yeah, it has Interlagos was a fun race. We know the fuel was involved in that. Let's see what happens at Barcelona for the first time. That will be ever thrilling. Phillip Island, of course, will wrap up the season, like we said. And it's time to wrap up today here from the RaceSpotTV commentary booth. It's been a brilliant race, of course, here for Week 10. And if you want to see more of this action, visit RaceSpot.tv. And you can join in on the action on iRacing.com. Grab yourself a subscription. And if you are a current user of iRacing, of course, get yourself a Black Friday. Is it, Randy? What do you call it in the US?
Yeah, we call it Black
renewals.
Friday. There's a few different versions of like Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Basically, whatever marketing scheme your company of choice comes up with to sell you stuff around the holidays.
I find that weird because Black Friday in Australia is, I think, marking bushfires that happened 40 years ago. So it's certainly the complete opposite to what you'd expect in the US.
Well, it sounds
which
very
is
negative.
Nothing to laugh about.
The reason it's got the name Black Friday is that in the past, this is going way back when like things were done by hand, the way businesses would identify profitable days or years or whatever is with black ink, whereas years or days where they lost money, they would do in red. So typically they would sell quite a bit on that sort of Friday right before the holidays. So it just became known as Black Friday because it's very profitable. Well, a little bit of capitalism to close out the show.
Exactly. Let's close it out here. I hope you enjoyed all the action, of course. We'll see you in 7 days' time for our next top split race from Barcelona.